Hello everyone. Welcome to the Craft of Grading 2 for Effects PhD. I'm Mike Matusik. This is Class 5, and today we'll be reviewing the Coke Challenge submissions. Appreciate everyone for sending in their attempt at coloring this footage in two different ways. I think the reasoning behind asking you guys to give us two versions really goes to client versioning. You know, a lot of times clients will walk into the room and sometimes they'll know exactly what they want and sometimes they want to see versions. And so you really have to try to find two contrasting looks just to give them, you know, a starting point for discussion. So, and a lot of times you'll literally have maybe 10 minutes to say, okay, here's one look, here's another look, what do you think? Or maybe we'll split the difference between the two. So again, a lot, I would say, of the majority of clients like to see something that they can react to, opposed to them coming in with a very exact idea of what they want. So this is a great exercise in versioning it and also doing something different that maybe you wouldn't have done on your own. You know, because a lot of times people just jump in and start coloring and go, I love the way this looks. But sometimes it's nice to kind of put on the brakes and say, okay, well, let me take a different look at this and just try something different. And sometimes you'll be like, wow, this is actually much cooler. I'm glad I did that. So first on deck here is user/member German Maui. None of these are in any particular order. I just kind of randomly dropped everyone's submissions in the timeline. So don't worry about that. So I'm just going to give you a little constructive criticism on each one. And, you know, whenever I see something, I'll just kind of have little talking points in each. But overall, everything looks great on everybody's pieces. And thanks for the submissions again. So I will just start playing through this one and get started here. So it starts off with a nice, cool, moody look. I like it. And goes through to the end. So nice job. So this, you know, overall has a moodier look. It's cool. It's desaturated. You know, I think it has kind of an atmospheric kind of vibe to it, which I like. It's great. I like the tone. You know, it feels good. It doesn't feel, you know, too clippy or it doesn't feel muddy. It just has nice tone to it. So, you know, the first shot, I like the whites nice and clean. You know, right away kind of just feels kind of, has kind of either an overcasty kind of mood, but it, you know, very moody. I like it. You know, there's some detail. You know, it looks almost like there's some flares going on the right, but there's some nice blacks. There's some nice blacks going on over here. You know, it's a little more opened here, so it has a nice kind of foggy look. I like that. Cut into here. It's nice. You know, if this was a client, you know, driven session, they may want to isolate the Coke machine here just to kind of bring your eye to it a little bit more, maybe make it, I'm sure they would say, rustier looking, to separate from some of the other. It's a very monochromatic kind of scene in the barn here. But, you know, if this was a feature, actually this is perfectly fine because it you know, it feels real. You know, you don't know, maybe you don't want to know what it is right away until you hit the shot. So, but good job there. Coming to this shot. Again, you know, I think it's consistent, feels consistent. You know, maybe the skin tones have a little red in them. You know, that's the thing. You know, you always fight with skin tones. Are they too red? Are they too green? You kind of want to be in that sweet spot, but you know, there might be a touch of red in there that maybe you isolate and pull out. But I like the sky. Again, I have, you know, above everybody's submission, I have just the raw red footage just to kind of A/B for you guys. But you know, looks like there's some vignetting going on, which I like up in the sky, helping to direct the eye. But feels really nice. Then we cut to the interior here. And I think the big thing here, I do like how the, again, client-driven type comment would be the Coke red really pops, so I think a client would really like the fact that the machine is vibrant in the red and the white and kind of that branding color scheme of Coke. So that would be nice, especially because we have this tool chest drawer thing over here that's red. You don't want this red to fight the Coke red. So whenever you're dealing with a client's product color, you want to make sure there's no other similar colors in that frame that kind of compete with it. So, but I think that feels nice that color is subdued, the red pops. Maybe this vacuum, I don't know if that's looks like that's a gas tank for a motorcycle or something back there, but that maybe I would say again, in a kind of a real life scenario, maybe you'd want to desaturate that red because it kind of draws your eye. Like, is that Coke? Is that part of the machine? But it looks like there's another Coke thing in the background. But that's just a comment, that could come up. But, always think of focusing the eye. You don't necessarily always have to focus the eye with vignetting or darkening areas. Sometimes by desaturating a color in the frame could help do the same thing. So, but another thing would probably be the match between this shot and to this shot. So you can see the white of the machine here is a little more gray in this shot, and the overall contrast and values of this shot, this is a little flatter, this is a little more contrasty. So you might be able to get away with vignetting the edges on this shot, maybe popping the white over here, and you can see he has a little more light on his face in this shot here. Then coming back to the wide, or the close-up versus the wide, you could probably work on the skin tone and matching that up a little closer. But this shot feels a little flatter, a little more milky in the blacks versus this shot. So, it's something to look at. But overall, I like the mood of this pass on this German Maui's take on this footage here. So, looks great. Let's look at his next attempt here. So right away, much more warm, golden kind of look here, and I'll just play through it, and then we'll talk about it. So cool. So again, a much different, I can kind of jump back and forth between German Maui's first pass, the moodier, cooler look versus the warmer. I like just the A/B versus that. It's nice right away. You kind of feel those rays of light coming through the barn. The golden light hitting the foreground here. That's really nice, kind of here to here. So that's really nice stuff. Door opens. It kind of as a viewer, you kind of like your eyes kind of adjust to the light. It has kind of a nice feel to it when the doors open. You could probably play with softening the clipping on the whites there a little bit. If you wanted to smooth that out, but actually I think it feels really nice. And then we cut to the reaction shot there. That's a pretty good match. You may, it cuts from here where they're a little bit washed out, because they're backlit, and then it cuts to this shot. You may be able to get away with possibly windowing this right side and lightening them up just to kind of give that a better match, even though they're obviously a little further into the barn, but that could be something to try for fun, just to match those up a little nicer. But no, that looks nice. I like it. Then we cut to the loading shot. Again, I think there's a little vignette there on the edges, which is nice. Again, I can show you the before. So he's got a nice amount of contrast dialing in there. What I like about it is the sky. You could go blue with it, but I think this has a nice feel because it has a morning warm feel. If you try to put a blue sky in a kind of a morning vibe like this spot is, it kind of doesn't make sense because the sky's not that blue in the morning. So I like how the sky up here is more white. There's a touch of blue up there, but it's more subtle, so that's nice. But as far as skin tone, I feel there's more, like, it's really nice up up here, you know, kind of still feel that golden highlight. You know, the skin tones aren't quite as red as in the last pass. They feel natural. You know, there's red in there, but it feels more right for the warmer version. So I can kind of, you can get away with it. But, you know, the skin tones feel nice. And then we come in to the interior here. And it has a nice feel, you know, the lamp back there has a nice warm feel, so I buy the fact that it's warmer in there. I think the match is much better than in the previous attempt, is version 1, I guess I'll call it. I think the black levels match, so I mean, even if the skin tone or maybe the Coke machine white here isn't a perfect match, the fact that your blacks are black in both helps the match. You know, the only thing I would say is, you know, watch the overall chroma. Might be a skosh hot, but, you know, again, if it was a client, they may like their Coke red to be nice and vibrant. So, but again, I would watch, again, this gas tank in the background, whatever that is. You know, it draws my eye, like, oh, is that a Coke product down there, or what is that, you know? So, again, just shaping the eye. And, you know, sometimes when you go from a close-up to a wide, if you want to accentuate that with a vignette, looks like you might have a little vignetting on there, but you could always, you know, put a elliptical, oval-shaped vignette and pull the corners down and help pull you in a wide shot. Sometimes is nice, but again, overall, some nice stuff there. Great job. I like both versions are great. I hope you got something out of trying two different looks and just seeing how, you know, creatively and emotionally they kind of contrast each other, and kind of the, you know, limitless possibilities there are of coloring the footage. You know, you could take it in multiple directions, and so, but great stuff. And let's go on to the next one. All right, up next is Jay War. I'll start with his version 1. So looks like his Jay War's version 1 is a nice, cooler, again, moodier kind of vibe to it. He's got some vignetting on the edges there. Cool. And then we end on this last shot. So nice version 1 here. So I like the tone, I like the feel. You know, I see some vignetting on the edges, which I like. You know, it kind of pulls you in. I would say it has more of a cooler wash. And when I say a wash, it feels a little bit more like this. You know, the skin tones have a little bit of the blue. You kind of lose a little of the red, which is, you know, again, it's not, there's no right or wrong as far as an approach. I would probably maybe have tried to retain some of the reds and the rust opposed to putting a blue over the whole thing, but it's a look, which is cool. You know what I mean? It's like when you can't argue a direction. So so I like it. So, and again, then we come to the inside and it flows. Sometimes when you go for an extreme, kind of a more, again, this is a very distinct look to start off, and then we come to a separate location, different time. It has, and you could actually change it up if you wanted to. You could actually just go warm with this, you know what I mean? So think about that when you're doing it, opposed to having, you know, the look come across, because this is a different time or place. So you could actually, you know, you could tweak it from there, but it still has has its own vibe. So you know, again, I would say when you're coloring a product like this, you know, washing out the Coke red. You know, if you don't have to like go commercial with it, you know, if this is more of a filmic type of look here, you know, watch those reds. Maybe you'd want to just pull a secondary on the machine here and just ever so subtly maybe saturate it a skosh and maybe, you know, twist it more towards a Coke red. Might pull you in a little bit. And as far as vignettings, this is something which is, I'm glad I saw this in this one. You know, they had some nice vignettings throughout the whole version 1 here. But whenever there's a vignette and then there's a pan, is sometimes where you can feel the vignette. So you can see right in this shot, you can see that vignette go across the old man pointing. So sometimes when you're going a little too heavy-handed on you can go heavy-handed on those vignettes, that's cool, but sometimes when there's a camera move, it can really kind of sell out the vignette, so you got to watch that. So what I would probably have done is maybe grab, if the vignette was here, you could grab that corner or grab that shape and just kind of pull it up a little bit, or maybe soften it up, and it would hide the vignette, but still come, kind of come across, get the mood you're looking for with the vignette, but you can hide it a little bit better. But cool. But good version 1. Again, thanks for the submission, and we'll check out version 2 here from JWar. So cool. Again, just again, version 1 versus version 2. So again, you went for the warmer side of things, which is great. It's a nice contrast. And this is a point, when you're trying to find two different looks, don't feel like it's cliche to go, oh, here's a warm look, here's a cool look. So, because, at the end of the day, if you just break down color to its very basic principles, it's warmer, dark, warmer, cooler, brighter, darker, it's like, you want it warmer, you want it cooler, you want it brighter, you want it darker. So, there's obviously other things involved with color correction, but you can break it down to those 4 things. So it's, so this is nice, to have a contrasting look here. Again, I would say with these highlights, sometimes when well, actually the highlights are actually somewhat clippy on the original red file. But you can see there's a little bit of detail in the ground there. So when you're pushing it, the highlights, maybe try to soften that up a little bit so it's not as hard, because when you clip whites like too hard, it has kind of more of a digital look to it. So if there's a way you can kind of smooth that out, maybe put a white soft clip on there, could help sell that transition to pure white. And again, you see a little bit of that vignette. And granted, these are H.264s, and when stuff gets compressed, sometimes those the blending of your vignettes can show more than when you were working on it in an uncompressed from the original R3Ds. But keep in mind, a lot of times people are coloring things that are going to end up on the web. So, be conscious of vignetting and softening those edges, because even though it may look great, say broadcast on television, maybe when it gets compressed down further for the web, those vignettes in those hard feathers could show up and be a little distracting. Again, with the whites up here in the sky. But again, stylistically, maybe you're going for that, so again, take this criticism for what it is, because, sometimes you want to go for that look, and that's cool. So, but then watch when you're pushing those whites, you can kind of see the highlights going a little more pink or magenta. So sometimes that's not necessarily ideal. So when you push those whites, make sure that's those super whites that are still have a little color there, to make sure they're kind of what you're going for. If you were going for a warmer look, make sure those maybe you're going a little more golden or yellow. And this is cool. I like this back end. It's pushed further. It's it might be a little too dense, too dark, but it's ballsy, and that's cool. It's a look. It's going for this guy's burning the midnight oil. He's up at 3 a.m. doing his thing. Finishing up his Coke machine restoration here. So it may be a skosh dark, but it's I like the idea, and again, I would watch this match between these two shots a little bit closer. This one's a little more crushed than this one. So, I mean, maybe this has a nice vibe to it. Maybe if you opened him up a little bit to match this and then let the background fall to where it is now, you know, that'd be it's a cool idea. So good job, Jay Ward. Great, thanks for the submissions. Good job, and we'll move on to the next one. All right, up next we have Mark R. Leonard and his two versions of the Coke spot. So we'll play his version 1. So this looks great. So good job here. We start at the top here. I like the vibe of this. You know, it looks like there might be a little sharpening thing going on, which is, hey, that's part of, you know, enhancing the image. You know, if you feel like, you know, sharpening it up will kind of bring you in. That's cool. It looks like there's a little bit of that going on. You can see the focus. If I actually zoom in here, you know, you can see the focus is a little soft, but be real careful when you do sharpen stuff to make sure it's not too sharpened, you know, because you don't want it to over enhance it. But no, that's, you know, it is a little soft back there. But I like it. It has a nice vibe, nice feel, warm. You know, that's a cool look to it. And we cut to the next shot. And again, I would say, you know, watch this match from here to here. They're so backlit and, you know, washed out. It's a little jarring to jump to this shot where they're so in the dark. You know, I would expect more light coming from behind them, so they would be a little, you know, even if, you know, when you put a window there, it might pull up their faces a little bit when you expect that to be a little darker. But I think it would sell okay by just lightening them up a little bit and then maybe feathering that out. But again, you know, sometimes it's all about mood and feel, and that, you know, this has plenty of mood, so that's cool. You know, cut into the loading shot here, and has a, you know, it's nice to feel, you know, when you bring the density down, you kind of feel these highlights really nice, and it kind of sells that morning kind of vibe. You know, I like the fact that the sky's not pushed to that Hallmark blue sky. You know, it's kind of nice that it's just kind of clean, you know. But this is almost the reveal of the machine itself. So you could always maybe grab that, push a little highlight there, or fill this in a little bit with highlight. That might help kind of, you know, right now it's like, where does my eye want to go? Do you want it to go to what they're loading, to their face? So you could get away with maybe putting a little something down here and pushing a little light down in here. But again, it feels consistent with the previous two shots as far as color, brightness, and density. Again, this shot might be throwing me off if this was a little brighter. I think that would help blend those together, but that's nice. Then we cut, and there's a little different palette here. You know, the beginning is a little more in the golds and the warm tones. Here we have a little bit more, there's a little more red going on, which is cool. It's okay to kind of change up the color tone. It's a different time, different place. And again, I could kind of feel that sharpening filter. And just be careful when you are sharpening. Sometimes maybe you like the sharpening where their face is, but if you look up at the top edge, you'll start to see that artifacting. And again, I'm working from an H.264, so I don't know what it looked in the original, but I'm working from uncompressed footage sometimes, and if I sharpen it up, you could get this line. If you see this little white line that's at the top, you know, hopefully that'll come through while you guys are watching this. But, you know, so what I would suggest is when you want to sharpen up the image, this is obviously out of focus. They got a narrow depth of field going on. So opposed to sharpening the whole frame, I would suggest, if you can do that in whatever system you're working on, put a shape on his face, feather that out, and sharpen that, and kind of zone, you know, you're sharpening to a certain location, then let it fall off naturally, and you'll sell your your sharpening better, and you'll avoid the artifacting on the edge. But that looks nice. I think I feel a little like diffusion up on the highlight. That's a nice touch up there. I think I feel a little diffusion. It looks like you soften that highlight. So that's nice. There's a nice vignette going on the edge. So, it kind of pulls you in. I like how that right side falls off. My eye originally wants to go to the bottom right, but with that vignette, it pushes your eye to the machine, which is great. This is a tricky match. When I take the challenge for class 6, I'll see how challenging this match is, because it is a little trickier. So, a little vignette on the left might help bring those blacks to kind of match that side of his face. But overall, version 1 looks great. Just a few little pointers there, and I'll jump to version 2. Let's take a look. So cool. Again, Mark took the approach of a warmer pass and a cooler pass. So that's great. It's definitely a contrast, and it's a different version to show your client. So again, the door's open, it's cooler. It kind of gives you a different mood, different emotion to the scene. Again, I would watch this match. Again, this is a little trickier here with the brightness and density there, but again, you're selling a different mood, which is cool. This shot, I noticed there's a little keying going on up in the sky there, and I see a little feather here between the blue and the white. That could be a cloud or whatnot, but no matter what you're working on, it's always tricky to key blue when you're dealing with these trees and dead branches or whatever. So be careful with those things. And selling the time of day. If your first shot comes up really bright like this, you can see how they feel there, and then here you can see how they feel much more down and dense. So that that maybe the time has passed or whatnot, but it feels like those should be closer in time. So maybe this should feel a little brighter. So maybe you could have windowed this and put a shape here and open them up a little bit, because always think of the time of day you want it to be. Should this feel like it's 6 a.m.? Maybe this feels like it. To me, this feels more 6 a.m.-ish. Or even 7, dusky or something. But this feels more bright morning, or maybe sunsetty with a look on there. So make sure you're paying attention to the time of day and that it's consistent. But again, has a nice feel to it. Just some matching things probably need a little help, but that's cool. And then we cut to the inside, and again, I like the fact that there's a change in look. That's totally cool. Different time, different location. His skin tone might be a touch red, but that's skin tones are always tricky. I like going back to a previous version someone else did. The last 2 I was talking about how this Coke red fights this gas tank over here. I do like how you zoned this off a little bit and kept the Coke red where your eye went, and then the reds of this tool chest and this gas tank are subdued, so your eye goes where it should go. You could even have played with, I could tell you desaturated and cooled off the surround and made it feel like there was kind of a spot of warmth on them, which is cool. You could have also probably brought the density down a little bit, so you're not feeling the surround quite as much, but that's a great idea. I'm glad you went that way with it. But cool. Thanks, Mark. Great versions here, and we'll go to our next one. Okay, up next we got Peppo here, so I'll play Peppo's version 1. So cool. So nice job. I like the mood. I like the vibe. Thanks for throwing the bars on the front end. I think that helps make sure we're looking at the same thing. So cool. So I like, this is the first one that has a little bit of the kind of green, slight green warmth to it, which is cool. It's definitely sets a different mood. And cutting from here to here, I feel like tonally those feel pretty, like a pretty good match. They're pretty washy, just naturally the beginning, and obviously they're a little further along in the barn, but I still feel like brightness wise, that feels a little more believable, a little closer. That feels really nice. And whenever you're dealing with contrast and you and this is a great thing to remember when you're coloring, is like, look for flares, look for little out of focus things in the foreground. Like, for instance, you see something right in here. So you kind of know that, and there's a window back here that's kind of flaring a little bit, and there's some dusty stuff going on here. So when you feel all those elements in a scene, leaving the blacks a little bit more raised up is okay. You know what I mean? Because naturally it's going to feel a little bit more washy. So you could feel like the washness of this shot is the background by the door, but it falls off to black in the surround. So that's cool. It feels natural. And in this shot, it's dusty. It's got a little flary thing by the window. It's got a little something in the foreground that's out of focus that kind of pops in. So naturally you feel like that feels right. So that's cool. Very nice. So then we cut to the outside, and tonally and color wise, it feels like it flows, again, you can kind of see the A-B. So cool. I see did a little work on the skin tones there, so that feels nice. Then we go inside, and so again, the same similar comments here, just with the reds. Make sure to kind of focus the eye. You might be able to get away with, again, just kind of maybe matching these up a little vignette, but overall, nice version 1 pass there. So here I'll play version 2 for you guys from Peppo. So I definitely feel like a film effect kind of vibe going on. I can see some film grain and some just kind of a tone curve that just has very more of a contrasty look, which is cool. And just because it's called color correction doesn't mean it just has to be color. I mean, you're dealing with the image in general. So any kind of textural thing like film grain or sharpening, like Mark did in his pass, that's totally cool. As long as that's something I would definitely make sure the client gives the okay on, because sometimes they can be, film grain adding or subtracting it, can be something that they'd like to know about. It's one thing if you kind of desat or you add a little contrast here and there and just kind of do it without telling them, but something about image texturing is something that make sure they're okay with, because you don't want to go down the road and then say, hey, did you add grain to that? So just FYI, but I think it sells in this. It's cool. I like it. I add film grain, a lot of like 5D, 7D stuff, kind of can have like a plasticky kind of vibe, because it's compressed. And, so adding a little film grain on there is kind of adds a nice feel to it. So let me start from the top here. So again, let's just compare to, let's see here. So this is Peppo's version 1 versus version 2. So you can see again, it's, this green, warm green to the cool. So that's nice. And I'm actually noticing, you kind of feel, I'm just noticing the little image, I don't know what he did there in the, looks like he put a little shape in there to kind of give that a little light, which is very cool. And that's the thing with color correction. I didn't notice that when I first watched it. So you can see he put a little window here of some sort to bring in a little something extra there. And so that's the key. You don't want anybody to feel it. You just want it to go by and just people take it for it being real. So that's a good job there. So it's a nice feel, nice contrast. The whites have a nice kind of filmic fall off, so it almost feels like it was shot in 16 or something. Very cool. The mids have kind of a nice contrast, kind of scoop to them. Kind of clean white sky. And he's got a little hotter key kind of on him there, which is nice. And again, this is a tricky match, I mean, this is my eye kind of wants to go, this back area kind of is fighting the Coke machine and the artist here, or restorationist, whatever you want to call this guy, the American picker. And so you want to I would probably pull a shape back here and just pull that down, because you really want to direct your eye over to him. But and even this little area behind the machine is kind of pulling my eye. But I love the color, I love the contrast, and the tone is great. Just it might help to shape it a little bit into just to draw your eye to where you want it to go. But great, excellent versions for Peppo here. So I will go to our next submission. Okay, next up we have Smita with Smita's 2 versions here, and I'll play version 1 first. So cool, there's a lot of nice, interesting things going on in this one, and I have to admit, on Smita's past, this version 1 was the first time I noticed that the Coke machine is actually in the shot right here. So I don't know if Smita did any kind of enhancement, or looks like Smita may have enhanced it a little bit, but it worked because I noticed it. That's cool. It's amazing when clients come into color correction. We color off of either a 50-inch plasma or a 12-foot D-Cinema display projector. So a lot of times the client's seeing it for the first time large, and they notice things in the frame, either good or bad. And this would be an excellent thing to notice, because that storytelling-wise is a great element to see. So being that I wasn't on this production, I had no idea that was there. A client would probably have told us as colorists to say, hey, the machine's in the middle of the frame there. Can we bring that out, because I'm losing it? And so that's a great thing. I mean, color correction, you're going for mood, you're going for emotion, but you're also bringing out elements to help tell the story. And that's very important, because, I'll go back to, in a previous one, the machine's here, but it's kind of lost there. A lot of again, I would have never seen that, to be honest with you. This one, it wasn't not as noticeable here, kind of blends in. So just to be equal opportunity, I'll show all the previous posts that we reviewed so far. And so in all of them, it kind of blended into the background. So that's really cool that you totally see it. So kudos to Smita on that one. And I apologize if I'm pronouncing your member name wrong there, but let's see. So then we get into the next shot, and again, I would watch the over sharpening or over enhancement, because it could look just artificially enhanced. And what I would suggest, if you feel like you really need to sharpen things up, is to maybe zone it out and just sharpen a little section. And you may have done that actually, but just be careful of that, because it's easy to do. It's easy to kind of over sharpen things. But it's a nice match. There's a little blue in the sky up there. And whenever you're doing blue in the sky, just be careful. You'll add a little blue, but try to offset that with a little bit of density. Sometimes when you add a little blue, sometimes it helps sell it if you just tone it down a skosh. Every time you add a little blue, if you darken it, maybe desaturate it just to kind of make it a little more believable. But I'd say it's blended really nicely, and I see part of your key here falling apart over here. So just be careful of that. Sometimes you can see it buzzing a little bit. So just be careful with that. I mean, when a client's seeing you work and they're seeing you struggle with a key, sometimes they'll just say, you know what, if it's too hard, don't worry about it. And of course, as perfectionists, as I'm sure all of you are, you want to try to, you know, get it right and to do it. But sometimes it's not, you know, sometimes not every sky is keyable, you know, when the foreground elements are as complex as a shot like this with the tree and the movement and stuff. But you know, sometimes if you have a key and you just want to, maybe you can put it in a shape and then just put it up top and feather it out. So by the time it gets to this lower part of the sky, it's not being keyed. There's different ways around it, but just, you know, watch that. But overall, color-wise and contrast, it's nice. I mean, I feel like, you know, the old man here's opened up, doesn't feel down in the mud or anything. I feel like I can feel it. It feels natural. You know, the sky's nice. It looks good. So we cut to the interior here. Some different vibes, a little warmer. That's cool. You know, I like how the reds over here to the left and to the right are subdued, and the Coke red is pop. You know, it really pulls you in and doesn't distract from the Coke red. I'd watch this match again. This is a little bit darker. This is much brighter. So that's a tricky match. So I will look forward to doing that myself. So, but no, great version 1 here, and I really like the fact that you enlightened me to the fact that the Coke machine is in that image. So very cool. So and actually, now that I'm looking back at this, I can see you pulled a secondary on the machine, which is great. Again, kind of to bring your attention to it and draw your eye down there. Again, I would, you know, I didn't notice it on the first few passes, so, you know, take this for what it is, because when you look at something for too long, you start to notice things. But just be careful of this little transition in the secondary here. You may just need to blur your mat, or, you know, feather that out a little bit more. Or don't feel like, you know, you could also maybe select this more, and then just, you can maybe draw a shape and track it on there. But you know, the more I look at it now, I can kind of feel that line a little bit. Another little trick is to draw kind of a minusing garbage mask type thing and feather that up, you know, to kind of mimic this little out of focus foreground element, and that'll help hide that little transition if you're struggling with that. But again, nice job on isolating that and trying to pull that out. And let's look at Smita's version 2. Let me center that up. So cool, a different vibe, different look, you know, from here's version 1 to version 2. And again, you can see, you know, hopefully it comes through on your guys' end, but this sharpening that's going on in this image, you can see the line artifact at the bottom. So be very conscious of that, because that, even in a QC kind of, you know, if it was being broadcast, that could get kicked back as like a QC issue. So if you're going to sharpen, you know, a shot like this, you may want to just sharpen the background with a shape and try to keep it away from the edges. Some sharpening, you know, like Baselight has a edge protection function, I believe, so it makes it a little easier, but I still don't really use that much. I usually draw a shape to where I want to sharpen. So but it's a little different vibe, it has more of the greeny, warm greens in there, which is a different look. That's cool. Again, it's a little over sharpened. Just watch that. This shot It feels a little fakey in the sky, you know. Just be careful that, you know, skies are tricky, you know. It's like with skin tone and whatnot. It's like it's easy to make it distracting than helping it. So, you know, sometimes if you're going to want to add blue, it's nice just to add the blue and feather it out. So by the time it gets to the bottom, I mean, what's helpful is look at a real sky when you're, you know, driving or whatever, you're walking around outside. Just notice the sky and how the transition from the blue down to the horizon line looks, and just try to, you know, throw that in the memory bank. And you can easily get away with bluing it up top and then slowly feathering it down to the bottom, and then you don't have to worry as much about trees and whatnot. But I like the fact that you tried to throw some blue in there to kind of contrast the warmer tones. And here, I don't know if I'm seeing a little bit of some secondaries. I don't know if you were going for kind of a duotone kind of thing, but you know, you can feel a little bit of the edges in the fingers and stuff. It feels a little strange, but again, this is a tricky match. But again, this is a little brighter versus a little darker. I can tell you try to keep the reds of the Coke versus the other reds in this image, which is good. You know, the blacks are a little washy red versus here they're not quite as, and there's a little green in the background in the shot versus this shot. But this is a tricky match, so this will be good when I do it to kind of walk through how I got these shots to match, because I can tell everyone may have struggled a little bit with this match because it is definitely different lighting. And you can take liberties in matching a wide to a close-up. Doesn't have to be perfect because, you know, it doesn't have to be, but, you know, it can be closer, and I'll go over that in a future class. But cool. Nice versions for Smita, and again, thanks for the submission, and we will go on to our final submission. Okay, and so the last one we have up here on tap is Phoenix, his two versions, and I will play version 1 of his. So excellent job. So first off, I also want to mention Phoenix. I know you posted your take on the music video in the forums, and I just want to say that's great. If anybody else wants to post, if say you missed the Coke challenge for class 5 here, and you want to post your take and get some feedback from myself, you know, feel free to post to the forum, or that goes for any of the class footage. If you want to just do something and get some feedback, you know, that's great. So cool. So this kind of has a cool vibe to it. Again, kind of a warm vibe, nice contrast. You know, this is a tricky match between these two. You know, just watch the density versus the brightness and the clippy of the whites, but I like the color. It's a nice color. You know, this shot, I like what you were going for with the density and the crunchiness, and then bringing the skin tones up. But whenever you go extreme like that, just be careful, because I can feel your tracked shape on this guy in the right's face. You can kind of feel the feather over here, and you can see it kind of go across this guy's jacket. And you know, sometimes, you know, I have a trained eye for that stuff, so sometimes you can get away with it. You know, there's plenty of times on TV I see power windows / shapes, you know, flying around, and 99% of the people watching would never notice. But I like you know, again, going a little ballsy with that, crunching it down, but trying to maintain the skin tones. Again, some nice contrast here. And I'd say match-wise, it still might feel, I'd say it's pretty good. It's actually a pretty good match. Again, it's tricky with these, you know, I like when those reds get dropped down and maybe this background goes a little denser, but that's a nice match. Overall, it has a nice contrasty, nice dense look. Before and after there. Let's play through it one more time, but if I feel something there. So sometimes when you add, you crunch the blacks a little bit too much, like for instance, and here's the flat, you can kind of see this flare from the window kind of just come through, so it wasn't there and now it's there. And so when you crunch the blacks quite a bit, it's almost like it takes your eye and you're like, well, what's going on over there? So keep in mind when you're crunching the blacks like that, just make sure it doesn't distract with any other little elements of the scene. Maybe if you open the shadows up just a skosh over there, it would minimize that, but it kind of drew my eye over there. Looks like you might be kind of vignetting that down, so maybe it's just a feathering thing. But again, I like the density and the kind of ballsiness of it. Excuse the language there, but so cool, nice version. And we'll go to, and I just also, when I see the comment I had on the window here on the face, I apologize if I didn't notice in other people's passes, not noticing if they did some special work on certain areas, but that's a good thing also, because when you're doing shapes and you're cutting out areas and you're trying to direct the eye with windows and secondaries and whatnot with contrast zoning areas, you want to make it feel like it was shot that way and as natural as possible. So kudos if I didn't notice. So and here's Phoenix version 2. So very nice. It's definitely a contrasting look to version 1. You can see version 1 to version 2. So a much flatter, bluer highlight kind of vibe. This is kind of random, but this kind of reminds me of like 80s and 90s films that were transferred in that era. It has kind of a nice, for some reason in that era, the telecine transfers tend to have very blue highlights. And it's kind of a cool vibe, so good job on that. But again, it's a very contrasting look. So it feels a little softer. I don't know if maybe you sharpened the first one, but there's definitely a softer feel to it, which is cool. It gives a different mood. And looks like this window. It's always tricky when you're coloring whites, because like, it's obviously on this footage, the white up here is clipped. So be careful when you're adding color to clipped white. Sometimes it could look a little video effecty. So, so that's the raw versus the colored. That's one of those telltale, more video-y kind of things. But it goes by quick, but it works. So cool. Again, I like the kind of raised blacks. Doesn't have to always be crunch. And, you can see you did some work in the sky. And I think it's pretty good on the, I might see a little key, something going on here. But again, I can see that's a very tricky key. But still has a different look. So cool. So we go from the outside to the inside. Again, more opened up, flat feel. Maybe the match could be this feels a little more washy. The blacks are a little denser there. So just keep an eye on the match there. Kind of interesting. I never noticed that before. This highlight here that kind of just comes and goes. I could see that a client would totally want to remove that, but it's the first time I noticed it for some random reason. But so cool. And I can see you kept the red in the Coke and then subdued the reds elsewhere, which is cool. Again, drawing your eye. Sometimes I don't know if it looks like you may have used it with a shape and feathered it off. And sometimes you could always maybe cut out or use a secondary to just do the red, because you can see some saturation in the cans back here, and then it falls off to these cans, feel a little different. So sometimes you can isolate that a little differently, but good job, 2 different versions, and I'm glad everyone that submitted did, and I hope you learned something about versioning and just trying 2 different things, and just realizing that, you know, when you're sitting with clients and they want to see versions, it's nice to be able to dial, you know, they don't have to be you know, that's the other thing to think of is when you're doing versions, each version, you know, option A, option B don't have to be the final look. You know, they just have to be ideas that kind of express what you're thinking, and then that's a path then the client's going to want to say, okay, I like B, let's go down that way, and just kind of play with that. So if you're quick and can, you know, have multiple ideas, you know, more versions the better, but obviously with time constraints and whatnot, and sometimes footage is only going to go one way. So don't feel like I'm talking about versions here. You know, sometimes clients come in and we just kind of hit the ground running with one look, and there we go. I mean, I do my best to kind of version things for clients, but sometimes, you know, if you know the drill and you know what they're looking for, just go for it. So, but most clients appreciate options. Great. So again, thanks everybody for their submissions. And next week for class 6, I will take my own challenge and give you guys 2 different looks for this footage. And I'm glad, hopefully everybody that didn't submit at least played with the footage and got some feel for it and had some fun with it, because it is very cool footage. And again, I'll do my take in the next class. And until then, we'll see you in the forums. And again, thanks for watching.